Horror Nights presents 5 chilling, true, scary horror stories. Number 5. What happened to Julie Mott? Julie Mott of San Antonio, Texas, grew up knowing that her life wouldn't be long because as a child she was diagnosed with cystic fibrosis. Nevertheless, Julie lived a full life, and it came to an end just shy of her 26th birthday. In fact, her funeral was held on her birthday, which would have been August 15, 2015. Her friends and family gathered at the funeral home in the afternoon for a visitation for Julie, who was a pretty and youthful-looking woman when she died. The plan was to bury her the next morning, but they never got to do that, because when the funeral home employees locked up for the night, they discovered that Julie's body was gone and the police are unsure who took it. One person of interest is Julie's ex-boyfriend. He was obsessed with her, and he was the last one to leave the funeral home. However, there is no evidence that he was involved in the body snatching. Another theory is that a disturbed individual found out about the young, pretty woman dying and decided to take the body for his or her own personal use. However, all of this is just speculation, and the whereabouts of Julie Mott's body is still unknown. Number 4. Who killed the Evangelist family? Italian immigrant Benny Evangelist worked as a carpenter in Detroit in early 1929. He was also known to dabble in the occult, even forming his own cult called the Union Federation of America. He also wrote a Bible for the cult and tried to sell it around the neighborhood. On the morning of July 3, 1929, a real estate agent working for the family let herself into the house. Once inside, she made a gruesome discovery. Benny was sitting at his desk, and his head was on the floor beside him. The real estate agent fled the house, screaming. The police were alerted, and they also found the cult leader's body. Next, they went to look in the rest of the house. In the master bedroom, Benny's wife was also dead. Like her husband, she had been decapitated. In another bedroom, the police found the 4 Evangelist children. The children, who ranged in age from 18 months to 7 years old, were all in one bed. They had all been hacked to death. The police concluded that the weapon was most likely a machete. However, the murder weapon has never been found. There was one suspect in the case, and it was a man named Aurelius Angelino. Aurelius had worked with Benny on the railroad, and the two shared an interest in the occult. In 1919, Angelino had been locked up in an insane asylum. His crime? Well, he took an axe and butchered his 2 children. Aurelius escaped twice from the asylum but was brought back. Then, in 1923, he escaped again, and this time he evaded capture, so he was free at the time of the massacre. However, since no one is sure what happened to Aurelius, it is unclear if he was involved in the brutal murders of the 6 members of the Evangelist family. Number 3. What happened to the Sodder children? Christmas Eve, 1945 didn't seem unusual for the Sodder family of Fayetteville, West Virginia. They had attended celebrations earlier in the day, and by the time midnight rolled around, George and Jenny and 9 of their 10 children were in bed. One of their sons wasn't in the home that night because he was serving in the Army. Around 12:30 a.m., the family's phone rang, and Jenny answered it. It was a woman calling, and it sounded like she was at a party. Apparently, it was a wrong number, and Jenny hung up. She went back to bed, and as she was drifting off to sleep, she was awoken by a loud thud on the roof that was followed by the sound of something rolling off of the roof. That's when Jenny smelled smoke, and she quickly realized that her house was on fire. Jenny, George, and 4 of their children got out. Sadly, 5 didn't. This included Maurice, age 14, Martha, 12, Louis, 9, Jenny, 8, and Betty, 5. The Sodders lived in a rural area, and when George went to start the family's vehicle to go get help, the car wouldn't start. Sadly, the fire department didn't come until the early morning, and the house was destroyed. Also, there was absolutely no trace of the 5 children. The logical answer is that their bodies burned up in the house fire. However, this is incredibly unlikely because it's really hard to destroy a body with fire. For example, bones only turn to ash after being heated at temperatures of 2,000 degrees for over 2 hours. However, house fires commonly never reach temperatures higher than 1,100 degrees, and the house burned down in 45 minutes. Yet there were no remains in the house, not even bones or teeth. Nevertheless, the fire was labeled an accident due to faulty wiring, and it was ruled that the children died in the fire. However, after the report was released, people started to note inconsistencies. For example, following the fire, a telephone repairman visited the house and said that it looked like the Sodders' wires had been cut and not burned. If that were the case, then there would not have been any hydro going into the house, making it impossible for an electrical fire to start. Then, after the fire, a chunk of burned rubber was found not far from the site. This has led to speculation that the rubber was part of a firebomb and was the loud bang that Jenny heard. As for the children, there is some speculation that they were kidnapped and the fire was used to cover the kidnapper's track. To back up this theory, there was a man seen near the Sodders' house with a block and tackle that is commonly used for car repair. Did this man sabotage the Sodders' vehicle? Another eyewitness, a server at a restaurant about 5 hours away, claimed that on Christmas morning she served 5 children who were with a man eating breakfast. Finally, the strangest possible clue came 23 years later in 1968. In the mail, Jenny received a letter with a Kentucky postmark, but there was no return address. In the envelope was a picture of a young man, probably in his early 20s. On the back of the photo, someone had handwritten, "Louis Sodder. I love Brother Frankie. Ill Boys, A90132 or 35. When Louis disappeared, he was 9 years old, so Jenny was unsure if the young man was her son or not. Sadly, George and Jenny both died believing their children were kidnapped and didn't die in the fire in the early morning hours of Christmas 1945. But no proof ever emerged to prove it one way or the other. Number 2. The horrible and disgusting Kevin Davis. As a young man, Kevin Davis of Corpus Christi, Texas, developed some dark fantasies. One such fantasy involved having sex with a girl after decapitating her, and another one involved murdering his sister. On March 27, 2014, Kevin, now 18, told his mother that he was sick of his life and he wanted to kill himself. His mother tried to talk him out of it, but for some reason this caused Kevin to snap. He grabbed a cord from his video game system and tried to strangle his mother. When that didn't work, he got a hammer and hit her 20 times in the head, cracking open her skull. To make sure she was dead, and we have to warn you, this is really gross, he got a knife and mashed up her brain. He also stuck his hand in her head and ate some of her brains. If this wasn't one of the most horrific murders we've come across ever, it only gets worse because Kevin then used the opportunity to lose his virginity. Yes, you heard that right. He had sex with his dead mother's body. After finishing desecrating his mother's body, he thought about killing his sister, but decided to flee on his bike instead. He turned himself in less than an hour later. At the police station, Kevin admitted to killing his mother and that he wasn't sorry that he did it. He also said she didn't do anything to deserve to die and that he was a disgusting person. Kevin pleaded guilty and he was sentenced to 100 years in prison. He said that if he got the opportunity to kill again, he would. Hopefully his cellmate doesn't try to talk him out of suicide. Number 1. The Strange Alexander Family. One of the oddest and most disturbing families of the last century was the Alexander family from Hamburg, Germany. It consisted of Harold and his wife Dagmar, their eldest child Marina, their only son Frank, and the youngest, a pair of twin sisters, Sabine and Petra. Harold was a religious zealot, and when Frank was born in 1954, Harold declared him as the Messiah. As such, whatever Frank said was gospel, and everything that he demanded had to be obeyed by the rest of the family. This took a dark turn when Frank became a teenager. Somehow he came to the conclusion that having sex with someone outside of his family was unclean, so he demanded that his mother and his 3 sisters have sex with him. Amazingly, they all agreed because they thought they were serving God. The police in Hamburg caught wind of the strange family, and they tried to investigate. When they did, the family picked up and moved to a villa in the Canary Islands. While there, the family kept to themselves. The only complaint the neighbors had was that they would play the organ at all hours. On December 22, 1970, a doctor paid the family a visit. When he knocked on the door, he found one of the twins, 15-year-old Sabine, preparing food in the kitchen. Sabine took the doctor to speak with her father, who was sitting on the patio with Frank. When the doctor got to the patio, he was aghast because both Harold and Frank, who was now 16, were covered in blood. When Harold saw his daughter, he walked over to her and said, "Sabine, dear, we want you to know at once that Frank and I have just finished killing your mother and sisters." While most of us probably would have screamed, cried, run away, or all 3, Sabine did nothing of the sort. Instead, she took her father's hand, which was stained with the blood of her mother and her 2 sisters, and said, "I'm sure you've done what was necessary." Harold then turned to the doctor, and he admitted to killing his family. The doctor told the living Alexanders to stay on the patio, and then he went and phoned the police. When they arrived, they found one of the most gruesome crime scenes in the history of the Canary Islands. A veteran of the police squad who arrived at the scene threw up upon seeing the gore. There was blood splattered everywhere. In the middle of the living room were the mutilated bodies of 17-year-old Marina and 15-year-old Petra. Their breasts and genitals had been cut off and nailed to a wall. One of the girls had been disemboweled. The police then went to the bedroom where they made another horrific discovery. Dagmar had also been murdered and mutilated. Her breasts, genitals, and her heart had all been cut out and nailed to the wall. Once in custody, Harold and Frank admitted to the murders. They said that Dagmar gave Frank a dirty look, so he got a wooden clothes hanger and started to beat her. Understanding what was unfolding, Harold started playing the organ and singing his praises to Jesus. Once his mother was unconscious, Frank went into the other room and beat his sisters into unconsciousness. Then he started to hack up the bodies until he became tired. Then Harold took over performing the mutilations, and Frank played the organ. One specific question the police had for the father and the son was why didn't the girls run away when Dagmar was being beaten? They said it was because their death was consensual and they gave their lives to God. Frank had talked openly about something he called the hour of killing, and the family knew that it could happen at any time. After the murders, Frank and Harold were committed to an asylum, and Sabine was sent to live in a convent. Frank and Harold have never shown any remorse for the horrible crimes they committed. Subscribe for more.